Hello, welcome to Backyard Wellness, a show that tries to show you healthy options from the region, community, and even your own backyard. And today my topic is donut economics. I didn't read the book by the same name. It's by Kate Raworth, but I did see a lot about it in these two magazines. Yes Magazine in the spring of this year, and also Permaculture magazine in the fall last year. So this is an adaptation of what she's talking about. Essentially, her idea is that there are intrinsic costs for where we are now with climate change, etc. And she doesn't look at the GDP or what Wall Street says the cost factors are, because there's intrinsic factors and costs. And so now I'm going to review some of it a little bit and give you little hints along the way about how we can change that paragram or dynagram or whatever we want to call it. Now, I've got to be real gentle because I've got a house of cards here on the table. So we'll see if I can be gentle enough and not give it away too soon. Since 1970, 2/3 of the world's animals and 75% of the insects are gone. It's estimated that by 2048, there will be no fish. We have lost 50% of our native bees, and our rusty patched bumblebee, which they have a picture of it here, the circle, is on the endangered list. Many beekeepers have lost their honeybees due to the colony collapse disorder. I'm sure you heard about it, and they not only had that problem, but when they transported their bees, the bees were confused by where they were, and they died too. So, for instance, a few years ago, the almond growers in California were totally at a loss because there weren't enough bees to pollinate their almond trees. But Paul Stamets made a wonderful, interesting discovery. One day he was out in his yard and he noticed these bees are turning over these little chips of wood that were decaying, and they were drinking the nectar from the mycelium under the decaying wood. And later he tested them out a little more, and he found out that they were not only busy drinking off all this nectar, but they were made stronger by it. And they were also, interesting enough, resistant to colony collapse disorder. I mean, wow, such a little thing, but yet it's amazing to me that they could be that strong just from doing that. That's why he was so pleased with it that he put a queen bee and just had them just circle all around him. I know this picture looks a little weird because it has all those bees and there's no beekeeper mask on him, but you know, they were so busy swarming to help to feed the queen bee that they really didn't care about him, I guess. I don't know, but whatever it is, the fungi from the decaying wood was something that was very important to those little bees. And we can help it. There was another Permaculture magazine article that talked about how to increase the fungi in our gardens. We can use perennial beds. We could plant no-till beds, raised, and let the dead trees and bushes lie and leaves, because some insects like to stay or winter over under the leaves, and also with the decaying of it, we build up more fungi, and then it builds up the land and the soil. So, but when you want to start a garden, maybe you want to add some homemade compost. So that's another project for us gardeners, to have the compost. Maybe you already have that in your garden. So good. That's great. And then in the garden, if we leave the roots in, at the end of the season, not dig up all the dried stuff, but just let it stay through the winter until we have the next crop. That again will cause the deterioration of the roots by these little nematodes and little bugs and insects to make a fertile garden for you. I know sunflower is a big woody one. You just whack it off at the ground level, but leave the roots in would be a good idea. So trust those fungi. There's good ones and bad ones, and you want to encourage the good ones. It's kind of like our own biome where we have good bacteria and bad bacteria, and we want to encourage the good bacteria. Well, those are ways to encourage the good fungi. I was just amazed that such a little thing with the bees could make such a big difference. But a lot of the things that have happened to us since 1970 or so with climate change and everything else, really it's those little things that we can do that can make a better situation. I'm going to kind of highlight what Prairie Moon Nursery in Winona had. They had a circle of life, and they talked about what I just said in more depth, where they have the native plant roots that break down and the dead, and they so that the nematodes and everything can feed off of it, and also it builds the soil. Then the caterpillars and moths like to eat off some of the new growth, and then there's the nectar of those flowers that the butterflies and the bumblebees love. And then as it dries out, the songbirds like to eat the seeds and then spreads the seeds so the seeds will come back again. And then there's little squirrels too that like to eat some of the nuts or things that have grown, or even, well, my squirrels like to eat my hazelnuts. So, I mean, that would be one thing. And then heaven help them, those little squirrels, if a fox should come along and take over. But that's important. It's part of the cycle. Then, of course, his excrement helps to fertilize the soil, too. And so it goes. But unfortunately, we've gone beyond what is easy to neutralize our ecosystem. Now, Kate Raworth puts all of these flags on the outside of this circle. She, in her diagram, puts the circle as the community, and then outside of it, where the ecology has been exceeded. It can't keep up with what we've done. So that's what these little flags are all about. So when we've overdone something, we have land conversion, climate change, chemical pollution, we have phosphorus and nitrogen overload. Yes, farming, yes, and I'll talk about that a little more. Then we have the ozone depletion, freshwater withdrawals. Then there's acidic oceans, air pollution, and of course, diversity loss, which we've kind of touched on already. So when that all happens, then that's when we realize that our world just had so many factors that it's like a house of cards, that the things that are going to be there are going to cause our house of cards to fall down, and we'll see if this works. Okay, well, it made it unstable, that's for sure. Oh, we can build it up again, but it'll never be the same. None of it will be the same as we try again and again to try it. That's why building again or changing our infrastructures in flood zones or where there's extreme weather is not the wisest thing to do, because we know that all these factors are going to impact it all over again. I need to tell a story here. You probably have one too, but I went through high school and nurses training in Miami, Florida, and I visited my grandparents about the mid-20th century. They had solar hot water. Now, granted, we had to take turns until it regenerated. Then we would also go out crabbing out in Matheson Hammock. We would take old fish heads that were tied up to fishing line, and we throw those fish heads out and pull them back real slow, and then we'd catch all kinds of wonderful crabs. I mean, it was fun. I mean, people came around to say, well, we've got a fish that's been chewed off. Well, yeah, that's true, but, you know. And then when at low tide, we could go out and walk on the Biscayne Bay and see starfish and other things. But 20 years later, when I wanted my kids to see the same thing and do it, it was gone. I mean, there had been seawalls built and everything else. Now, when I was a kid, too, if there was a storm, the coral rock, which is under everything in southern Florida and Dade County, filtered the water. So when you have a storm, then it'd be flooded for a few minutes, but then whoosh, down it would go into the coral rock. Interesting thing, though, when we built man-made lakes in the coral rock so that people could have a lakefront apartment and home, there was the fresh water there in the coral rock. Well, too many people did it, and my uncle, who was on Public Works, figured out that he had a nightmare trying to desalinate the drinking water. So now we hear about that, the desalination, the loss of the ecology because the mangroves are not there anymore because we've been building so that there's a sea view. And also there's the flooding to such a point that if you look on the property description by realtors, they'll say how many feet above sea level. Now, we in my house felt like it was wonderful to be 1 foot above sea level, but my aunt is at 2 feet, 2.2 feet above sea level, and that's prime territory. I mean, people are just, you know, just waiting for her to sell the house because that is awesomeness. I can't believe it, but that's what it was. Also, the hospital where I trained was built to counteract a malaria epidemic. Now, granted, they don't have malaria anymore, but they have all these other things. So that's the outer circle of going beyond the ecology, and this is the community. A community that needs to be healthy and stable, needs to have health for all, energy that's, you know, constant. Just think of Puerto Rico and even Texas lately. Housing. I mean, when I think about this list, I'm already thinking about how the pandemic has affected each one of these things, too. Not that that's one of these, but it's very similar. It's a corollary. So there's gender equality that would be in a healthy community. In other words, working, equal pay for equal job. Work and income would be smoothed out better. Social equity, that everybody can be a participant in the health, education, and have water and food. And everyone would have a political voice so that those that make decisions will be listening to those who they affect with their decision making. And I think that would be just such a peaceful situation to not be so worried and stressed about any of these factors. Because, again, back to our pandemic, people are out of work, or they're ill, or some people have not been educated because of the inequity of social inequities. So it all fits together. That's why Kate Raworth says, you know, this is happening at a big expense of this. And we need to look at this, and if we did these things, we would most likely not have these things happening to us. Well, while I'm a little bit on the COVID thing, I know I talked about the fact that most of the people that succumbed to the COVID didn't have enough vitamin A and D and zinc in their diet. Up to 95% of the population is deficient in vitamin D. So I encourage you to build your immunity by having the right levels of A, C, D, E, zinc, and I hope when you heard my show before that you are working on lowering your omega-6s, which are inflammatory. Inflammatory causes those comorbidities that we keep hearing about: heart disease, diabetes, all cancer, all of those things, and most of all, you succumb from illnesses from infections. So build it up. Now, in a previous show, I also talked about the fact that there's pesticides. Number one, glyphosate, which is done by Monsanto Bayer, or found in Roundup. That we're putting 300 million pounds of it in the USA as a pesticide on our feed grains and other products too, other foods. 93% of Americans have it in their bloodstream. And it breaks down the junction in our gut so that we have leaky gut. I know there's people that hear that. And so it allows the chemical to get into our bloodstream, and it even goes through our blood-brain barrier. They have found that there's 1-year-old babies in Mexico in very smoggy areas that already have the amyloid plaque that's the same as those people that have Alzheimer's at an older age. So it's mean. It's also especially found in high levels in the Midwest because we have so many grains that it's in our rain and our dust. So if you want to detoxify, this is a wonderful thing. For 2 weeks, try to take 3 grams of glycine twice a day. And you'll probably detox by then. And glycine is found in gelatin, bone broth, poultry skin, seafood, red meat, legumes, and the whole egg. If you want to know what's happening in Wisconsin, the governor had a task force, and they made a 220-page report. They looked into climate justice, energy, transportation, agriculture, resilient systems, clean economy, education, food systems, forestry, and then they had 3 policy pathways. They were considering the fact that we are having an increase in a warming climate. Before it was a minus 75 in 1910, and now it's up to 1.8 above. So it's a plus, it's getting hotter. In fact, they say that the lower half of Wisconsin had 10 days of over 90 degrees between 1981 and 2010. But Trempealeau County is projected to have 30 days along the river and 20 days inland from 2041 to 2060, assuming that we continue with our greenhouse gases as they are, and they continue to rise. Our greenhouse gases mainly come from from transportation, 24%, agriculture, 15%. There's also electricity is the highest one at 33%. Industrial energy and processes are 14%, and residential and commercial building is at 13%. So, but there was a big dip in everybody's greenhouse gases between 2005 and 2017, but the ones that increased a lot were at agriculture and business. The reason was that the carbon sequestering forests and lands were being chopped up and being developed for industry and also agriculture. So we lost that ability for our area to breathe and take in carbon dioxide and transfer it to oxygen because we lost all that natural carbon sink capability. I recommend learning more about the activities through the Sierra Club, Isaac Walton League, the MRE, Midwest Renewable Energy Association, participated in the governor's task force. Also, the Sustainability Institute from Western Technical College in La Crosse. There's also a sustainability department at the University of Wisconsin that participated again in the governor's task force. But who didn't were Moms Across America, Environmental Work Group. Those are really good groups because, like the Environmental Work Group, they'll talk about what kind of foods are not contaminated by things like glyphosate or other herbicides and pesticides. The Moms Across America developed because they wanted to protect their children, and so on many issues that have occurred because of these flags, other than what is good for us, they try to politicize or make campaigns to effectuate change. So in closing, most scientists agree that we have approximately 9 years left to make a difference. We can turn things around, but we're going to have to turn our image around to accept that we need to accept the trends, dare to imagine a better ecology for everyone, and take this on as an opportunity, not an obstacle, to have the kind of society we want to have for ourselves and for future generations. I will continue to talk about how we can adapt to some of these extreme situations in future shows, because I think it's like the bees. We can do little things to make a big difference. So thank you very much for watching Backyard Wellness, and I hope you see me more in the future. Bye.